Hi, this is Tom with Coherent Logic, and today I will give you a quick demonstration of the CMR Data Acquisition API in the Spark Cluster Computing Platform. We will use CMR to acquire S&P 500 data from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, and once you understand this example, accessing the other data sets is easy. So you can see that we have Spark running. It's a single node in this instance, nothing fancy. On the right-hand side of our screen, we have the FRED website for Federal Reserve economic data. There are a number of series here. If we click on one of these series, for example, the S&P 500, it will take us to a page that looks like this. The S&P 500 has a series ID called SP500, and we need that. And when we invoke the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis's web services, the data will be returned in XML form, and that's what we can see here. Now the URL up here we're going to compare in a moment, but we do need that URL. And let's go into a little bit of code. So in this case we have an API key, and this is provided to us by the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. We have some imports, and I'm going to create a new instance of CMR. That's done here. And now we'll take a look at the query. So this is our query. We have SP500 here. And we're going to wait for a moment while Spring wires together the components for our API. And once that happens the first time, subsequent calls will not be affected by the same kind of delay. So we have some data. As a quick aside, let's take a look at the query. The URL is at the top and our query is at the bottom. So we could see that we have Fred series observations, and it reads the same in our API, Fred series observations. We have an API key. We set the API key in our API using a method called withApiKey. And we have a series identifier SP500, and that is set using a method called withSeriesId SP500. Finally, we invoke a method called doGetAsObservationsDataSet, passing an instance of Spark. And once that returns, we have a data set with SP500 observations. So in this example, since we have the data, we take a quick look at what's in the data, and starting with the count. So we have 2,625 results, and we will show the first 5 to get an idea of what's in there. So we can see that data. We're not going to do any analysis in this case. So moving on, we have other series that we could take a look at, and in this case we could do the Case-Shiller U.S. National Home Price Index. I have an example already for that. So in the right-hand side of the screen we can see the S&P Case-Shiller U.S. National Home Price Index with the series ID here, and I already have the query constructed for this. You can see that this has 517 rows, and we can also notice that it returned much quicker this time because we no longer have the upfront wiring impact when the API was initially started. So we can try a couple others. I won't read them out, but they each have their own series identifier. And so we can see in each case the queries had, in this case, 517 results, 217, 373 rows, 2,709 rows, 325 rows, 1,032 rows, 855 rows, and finally 5,035 rows. So this concludes our example of the CMR Data Acquisition API for the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. Please feel free to leave questions and comments, as any feedback is always welcome. Bye-bye.